She is going to bring us up to date, to bring us and bring our consciousness, hopefully, into this moment. Caroline, for those who don't know, is a collaborator and a ghostwriter with a background as a literary agent. And she has worked as an editor and a book doctor for publishers such as Harper One, Crown, bonus books, and authors such as Mike Ness of the legendary punk band Social Distortion, and Ghost wrote Rick James's memoir, Confessions of a Super Freak. Caroline also graciously patiently moderates our Wednesday night discussions and always comes up with fascinating topics. She has a very sensitive heart, and not everybody's ready for a sensitive heart, but we are surrounded today with people who are. So I'm going to ask you to graciously receive Caroline Greeven.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that intro. Well, I think one day on one of these talks, I should just read out the highlights from the Rick James memoir. That might be fun. I loved when I logged in this morning, you said, life is full of wonder and we are here for it. That was the little click on sign for Zoom. And I just thought that was beautiful. And in my own slightly circuitous route, that's where I hope to get to today as well. As Pastor David said, I'm a writer, and one of my topics that I cover is business and marketing. So I'm often keeping my eyes and my ears open to see what the tech world has in store for us next. What are tech people excited about? What's the next vanguard? What upgrades do small inventors and megacorps alike think we need or want in the next iteration of this human experience? How will tech help us find meaning in our lives and the future and make the most of our time here on Earth? So this year at the 2023 Consumer Electronics Show, not sure if any of you followed it or checked in with that, there are a whole bunch of upgrades. Some were pretty silly. A fitness tracker collar for your dog, a spoon that describes the taste of your food to you, fully automated boba tea bars, shoes that function like miniature mopeds and can double your walking speed, and most darkly funny to my eyes, a standing desk that can lower itself to a height suitable for a kindergartner. I suppose a highly motivated and ambitious kindergartner. A German company is developing an exoskeleton-like backpack that can allow warehouse workers to lift heavier items for longer durations. And several companies have designed what look like oversized, sleek, and streamlined gas masks that completely cover the eyes, ears, and mouth. The purpose of these is to completely encase the wearer's head and allow them to fully participate in the metaverse without their conversations and exclamations disturbing the IRL people around them, or vice versa. I don't know about you, but some of these ideas seem silly, some seem creepy and dystopian, and some seem like they could genuinely improve lives. A talking spoon isn't such a bad idea for somebody suffering from long COVID. And the moped shoes or a backpack that comes with superpowered lift assist could be life-changing for anyone living with mobility issues. One of the last things I checked out was a video on Bloomberg News. A journalist who covers tech was giving the anchors a wrap-up of the day's biggest topic of conversation, ChatGPT. She took a breath and then said, "Within 2 years, most online content will be generated by predictive AI." She smiled and added, "It's very exciting." Personally, I kind of disagree. The idea that most online content will soon be generated by AI is many things, but exciting is not exactly how I describe it. Instead, it feels a little unsettling, as if we can suddenly feel the tectonic plates that underpin the experience of being human speeding up. Instead of their former imperceptibility, we can now sense their shifts in real time. Early stage investors and tech behemoths alike are turning their attention from cryptocurrency to these generative AI technologies. If, like me, your job relies on putting pages together, putting words together on a page, processing numbers, creating visual images, reviewing documents, grading papers, ChatGPT could be coming for you. In fact, older versions of this kind of tech already write short pieces of journalism, mostly sports scores and stats. If your job requires you to interface with customers, greet them as they enter a business, be aware. Already there are algorithms that can narrate audiobooks or radio commercials or answer rudimentary questions at a call center. A new invention can also change the direction of an actor's eyes, creating direct eye contact where there was none before. And even if you are a lawyer or an accountant, watch out. ChatGPT is about to argue its first court case, a speeding conviction in San Francisco. Let's hear from an expert on this matter, and I quote, "Artificial intelligence has the potential to automate many tasks that were once done by humans, including those in creative fields, and it may become capable of performing tasks that were previously thought to require human creativity, such as writing, composing music, and even art creation." Okay, so full disclosure, that was written rather poorly by ChatGPT, and based on it, I would say we are safe for a few more years at least. So all of this has me thinking of a couple of things. One is the anger I feel at the ever faster erosion of creative work. Why do local journalists and photographers, for instance, no longer deserve a living wage, or often any wage at all? Good question, I think. Two is the opposite, opportunity. There is a chance here to change how we experience our place in the world, perhaps. In the early 20th century, economists believed that humans of the future would be working as little as a few hours a week. They thought the ever more efficient innovations of the workplace would free humans to live their lives meaningfully. Instead, employers realized that by keeping the benefits of efficiency to themselves, they could get by with fewer factory or field workers and keep the exponentially growing profits for themselves. A similar thing happened on the domestic front. Housewives were not freed up from their labors by ever-improving vacuum cleaners or washing machines, but instead encouraged to push for even greater levels of cleanliness and perfection. Today, I think we're at a similar inflection point. Everything is changing, and the chips are still in the air. Where they fall is still uncertain. Personally, I don't have much faith in the earnest young tech bro futurists to share the vast bounty of free time or money that comes from automating millions of jobs. And alas, our legislative bodies don't seem to move fast enough to keep up. If we're going to hold on to our jobs, our income, our self-regard, and our sense of place in this world, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And I believe at the core of this is a vital and urgent reassessment of how we look at our world and experience ourselves within it. One way is the meta way, immersing ourselves more fully in an artificial world. No doubt this world will slowly become less artificial and more real as more people populate it, creating their own languages, references, culture, and social norms. As dystopian as it may feel to many of us, perhaps this metaverse will offer freedom and connection and meaningful self-expression to people who might otherwise be isolated from their peers. The metaverse mask wearer is traveling to new places, but not in the way that any of us have ever experienced it. And that may be a liberating and amazing thing for many people who otherwise would not get to experience one of the most life-changing adventures any of us can go on. After all, the experience of stepping off of a plane into an unknown to you world is one of the greatest and most meaningful joys in the world. Travel is a chance to meet people from radically different life experiences to yours, to visit museums and natural wonders, experience new cultures, eventually coming home with a subtly shift perspective on the world. Imagine being able to open those doors to people who are unable to get on a plane or simply don't have the resources to travel. And of course, travel isn't always fun. Sometimes it's what extreme sports and adventure types call type 2 fun. Suffering in the moment, but an experience you refer back to constantly over the course of your life. And one that gives shape to who you are as a person, the chances you are willing to take, the things you prioritize and deem important. About 10 years ago, I got to go on a hunting trip in the remotest part of Wyoming. We rode 10 hours into deep wilderness on seemingly unmarked, at least to me, trails through snowstorms and slippery scree fields that the horses slid down on their haunches. When we arrived at camp, it wasn't the promised comfortable experience. In fact, it wasn't even set up. Instead, the head guide had drunk a bottle of Jim Beam on the ride and was waving a .45 caliber rifle around, raging at his hands, berating his horses. Later that night, the whiskey wore off and his headache began, establishing a pattern of drunk or hungover that would stay for the rest of the week. A bear scratched at our tent while we ate. The latrine was unspeakable, the company was questionable, and all in all, it was a deeply uncomfortable week. In many ways, it was awful, but it was also amazing. We got up before dawn, rode through the dark, trusting the horses to pick their way across river rocks and fallen trees alike. I'm sure many of you have experienced a grueling trek or a long train ride or an adventure overseas that left you simultaneously longing for the comforts of home, but reveling in the experience of feeling yourself literally expand. As cold or as hot as you might have been, as dirty as your clothes perhaps were, you knew this would be a defining moment that would change the way you see the world and experience life. Your experience altered who you are and the trajectory of your life in ways that can be hard to understand. These days, it's getting harder and harder to justify getting on a plane to far-flung destinations. The environmental costs are undeniable, but so are the social costs. A recent book, The Last Resort, explored how smaller tropical countries all across the equatorial belt, like Vanuatu, were taken apart and remade by the global tourism and the accompanying airports, tourist attractions, hotels, and resorts that colonized their land in the 20th century. I'm guilty myself, of course, because I've traveled all over the world, including many colonized places such as Hawaii, where my husband and I stayed at the Navy Lodge in Kauai, right on the huge empty beach, strictly off limits to locals or non-military personnel. We don't even have to go that far afield to find stories of how desirable beach properties have been torn from their rightful owners, as the Bay Street Beach story in Santa Monica demonstrates. Point Mugu has one of the best beaches in Ventura, closed to most people. I'm sure the Chumash have thoughts about that. So how do we experience our worlds in a way that is both ethical and meaningful? How do we expand our horizons if expanding them is sometimes detrimental to the horizons themselves? The avid metaverse enthusiast might argue that virtually experiencing a city is equal or perhaps even better to physically traveling there. Early in the pandemic, I read an article about how the citizens of cities like Dubrovnik, Venice, Amsterdam, and Barcelona were reveling in the newfound emptiness of their streets, suddenly clear of the tourists that had overtaken their scenic places. A Dutch man described pulling a chair out of his living room to sit in solitude by the bank of the canal he lived on, fully immersed in the sensations of his surroundings for what felt like the first time in years. He was home, but experiencing and feeling home in a way that had been impossible for decades. His home had been reborn to him, and he was alive to every chirp, every bubble, every breeze, every clack of a heel on a cobblestone, every sudden flop of a fish rising to the surface or a bird swooping to meet it. And I think somewhere here is a clue to how we can begin to experience our world without hurting it, while still being immersed in all its wonder and glory. Over the last few years, we've had speakers from all over the realm of human experience. One of my favorite talks was by Grace Osborne, who spoke of the importance of really hearing your world. She leads walks and excursions to help people drop into a kind of sensory receptiveness. She found that listening is a kind of meditation. Perhaps at the right moment of your life, you can really hear God in a sparrow's song. As she spoke, I remembered the unique whistling sound of a train racing through a tube tunnel towards the platform in the original stations buried deep underneath the heart of London, where I used to live. It's such a distinct and memorable sound that it shows up in songs as shorthand for a certain kind of feeling, perhaps melancholy contentedness. And as I remembered that sound, I realized I had a whole world locked up in it. And just thinking of it unleashed those memories for me. So here it is. Perhaps the way to experience the world deeply, fully, and passionately is to find vulnerability and openness to experience wherever you are right now. Some of this is simply being in your surroundings. Some of this is being present with the fellow travelers you find in your day-to-day reality. Some of this is finding a depth in your connection to place. Perhaps the explorations in our future will be less about traveling broadly and more about traveling deeply. After all, how much do any of us really know about our own little patch of this planet? Can you name the flowers that grow in your garden or the birds that nest in your trees? Can you identify the medicinal herbs that grow on the verge and say what the original and rightful inhabitants of this land would have used it for? If you feel you've seen it all and know all the stories there are to tell about your hometown, well, are you sure? Who is the poet laureate of your block? Or the Michelangelo of the abandoned strip downtown? What are the wild mysteries of your home? Who are the figures who live on in schoolyard legend or the creatures of ancient myths your grandparents once talked about? Where are the great museums of your small town? What stories can you pry out of old maps? What forgotten truth is waiting to be discovered in the archives of your library? What are the secret wonders that the children of your street know about and the adults have forgotten? Some of my favorite Instagram accounts lately are wild foragers. These mostly young people are re-educating themselves on the berries, fruits, greens, seaweeds, mushrooms, and other plants that our ancestors and the original indigenous inhabitants of the land would have fed themselves on. They aren't traveling widely to do this. Instead, they are traveling deeply, wading into roadside verges, overlooked parks, and overgrown empty lots to find treasures that are literally hiding in plain sight. Once back home, they are reviving the old recipes, grinding acorn flour, perhaps, or making dandelion and mustard green salads. Other people are rediscovering ignored public art or the uncelebrated infrastructure of their own towns. Some do this a little dangerously, breaking into abandoned and locked municipal structures, perhaps the old opera house in Detroit, to film themselves exploring the past. Others are seeking out the hidden artifacts of the past that have been incorporated into buildings and structures we use today. People are turning to urban gardening as a way to turn their attention inward and down to the details of their immediate lives in a way that I find hopeful and inspiring. They are looking at their lawns and seeing potential for something bigger and better right in their front yard, pulling up grass and putting down containers and mulch and dense rows of vegetables. In Los Angeles, gardeners like Ron Finley have led the way in reclaiming verges and abandoned plots and planting them with vegetables that are free to members of their community. I believe all these people are practicing a localized yet radical act of hope and belief in the future. After all, we don't know what is going to happen next, here or in the world at large. And most of us can do little to help the suffering people in the world. We can't stop the floods, the droughts, or the wars. We can't persuade oppressive regimes to love their children rather than murder them, or to view women as fully human and deserving of rights. We can't even persuade our own local police forces to see their fellow citizens as fully human either. AI technology could make life better for all of us, or it might simply funnel even more of the world's wealth to the already rich and powerful, leaving even more average people out in the underemployed, under-resourced cold. We can rage against the unfairness and wrongness of that, and we can simultaneously resist it by finding ever more joy and purpose in the parts of our life that AI can't touch. How? By finding bigger things in smaller spaces and doing everything we can to preserve and build upon the good that exists right here, right now. It's hard work. If you want a bountiful garden, you need to tend your soil. In the Midwest, there's a push afoot to re-prairie vast tracts of land. Those old prairie grasses had deep roots that held the precious topsoil together and preserved it through drought or flood. When those deep-rooted grasses were replaced with shallow-rooted crops, the land was unable to resist the howling winds of the Dust Bowl and lost 7 inches of topsoil. Our world will only hold together as long as our topsoil does. That topsoil is community, connection, vulnerability, love, and acceptance. The world is full of suffering that is beyond our reach in many cases. But let us do what we can in our own tiny little pinprick point on the map to truly see our world and to know and understand it, to cherish its wildness, to love its people, to know its mysteries, and to breathe ever more life into it. In other words, let's make the world better here and now to the best of our abilities. Imagine if one of us did it. Now imagine if we all did it. Everything we know about our place in the world is going to change. If an algorithm can do a job, it probably will be doing it sooner than any of us would like to imagine. I'd like to believe wise heads in government and business would see the folly of this, but perhaps they won't. Our best defense might be the radical embrace and celebration of the joyful details of our own humanity, and as much as we can, a rejection of the brutal utility of ChatGPT. Our best defense might be an even deeper and ever deepening connection with the things that no chatbot or AI actor will ever really understand. After all, ChatGPT is never going to feel the sun on its face or the joy of pulling up a head of wild garlic. It will never know what it feels to be deeply connected to other people or the joy of seeing a goldfinch return to a familiar bough. It will never fall in love, have a friend, or even be mildly annoyed. It will never experience a flash of brilliance born out of hours of bored rumination. And that may be its Achilles heel and our saving grace. So let's find meaning in all the things that will never mean anything to an algorithm and find new ways to explore our world deeply, lovingly, and kindly.
I hope that's going to be published somewhere, Caroline. And I hope soon, because it's very much in the moment in terms of its empowerment capacity. And I thought about when you said when you read that excerpt written by Chat, when you read that and you said that it was done poorly and so we're safe for a few more years, in the back of my mind, I was hearing the voice of the chat platform saying, "Not if I have anything to say about it." But one thing I think was recurring, and we'll open the floor momentarily. One thing that kept recurring in my thoughts, and I'm probably not alone. Like many innovations, AI developers and other tech developers probably enter with the kind of motives that innovators have had for forever, and that is to make things better, as you said, to make things easier, to make a better world. But of course, that the way it plays out may reflect the polarities inside the developers that may not be so obvious, may not be so visible. And so that's why it's always up in the air. As you finished, you talked about it could go one way or the other. And it feels like that all the time. But these days, it almost feels like it's mostly going one way and not the other. And, for many of us anyway. But you were sensitive enough to realize that this could be very much a positive for people who are aged, people who have disabilities, that kind of thing. And that is precious. But most of us don't want to live lives like the aged or those with disabilities. And we don't want to, surrender, if you will, to the possibilities that we could learn. You also mentioned, indigenous people. There are possibilities that are, in their contexts that are rich, but we are not conditioned to accept them, to embrace them, to enjoy them. So, I mean, you went really deep. You went really, that was, so thank you for that.
I think that's what we're all, anybody in my line of work is kind of thinking a lot about this lately. So
yeah. Hmm. Well, don't want to close just yet. If someone else has something on your heart, some way of response or inquiry
Or a rebuttal. I'm
or
open to the fact that a
rebuttal.
lot of people feel very positive about it. So, Emily.
Yeah, Emily, what are you thinking?
Oh my gosh, that was so amazing.
Oh.
I was like writing things down the whole time. Like, oh, such a good point. So good. So retweet to the statement that that should be shared widely
Oh, thanks.
somehow, some way. But I think, oh my gosh, so many thoughts. The ending was so hopeful. I mean, all throughout, I love that there was a vein of hope because there is always a vein of hope. So I was really appreciative of that. And I think when you were talking about, how perhaps we feel like, there's nothing going on, we've seen all there is to see, but we're so disconnected from like the native flora and fauna on our block, something like that, or the people that surround us. The whole time you were speaking, I was thinking about this idea of like having the proximity without having understanding, and like without having true connection. And it made me think about these AI, these generative bots and their databases that they pull from. I know a few people who work with machine learning, adding to the databases, and I think about the art AI that caused a ruckus last month, and it made me imagine all of the people who contribute to those databases, whether they know it or not, if they were all in a room together, all the mathematicians who had to do the problems originally that these machines learned, all the artists or all the writers who created the content that the machines learned from. And I think that that is part of what feels so cold about AI to people like me is, it's like stripping this network of human knowledge from its like physical form and like in a way like its spiritual essence. And I think also the like tangible devices that do this work, we've also stripped them of their like physical history. And it's like in the interest of all these companies that we remain as ignorant as possible about the materials that are used and how we get those materials and what human labor is involved in those materials, like you talked about. For all this innovation, we still have so many issues with workers having so few rights.
Right.
But I think, yeah, the idea that we can all reconnect to the things that are near to us and not necessarily, as Pastor David said, totally write off the people who need to find connections to things that are far from them through technology. I don't know, I feel like I'm so frustrated by so much of this, and you so eloquently and beautifully and
Oh,
wonderfully
thanks.
weaved a web of thoughts and ideas that I feel like is very fertile ground for more conversation.
Well, thank you. I
That
appreciate
was
that.
my thought.
Anybody want to add to this? Emily, that was shining. That was great. Thank you for you. It's like Caroline brought us light and then you shone light on the light.
I think Scott had his hand up.
Scott.
Yeah, I loved it. Caroline.
Oh,
Also
thanks.
loved what you said too, Emily. Yeah, you should publish, Caroline. But it's in Time Magazine, which we get because I figured out we got away from getting like all these issues for like nothing, deal. But there's an article, and it's about, and I'm going to butcher this name, and I apologize. Amis Hassabis. He's the head of CEO of DeepMind, which is an AI company, and its headquarters is in London, incidentally. And he's probably the biggest mover and shaker of AI. And the article really is telling the world that how dangerous it is and how dehumanizing it is. At the same time, it talks about how his company is helping to get us to figure out how to do fusion which is be pollutionless, also can destroy the world in its own right as a weapon. So, you know, I'm listening, you know, I'm just like the happy dinosaur. I'm realizing I can't stand my cell phone. I carry it around. I feel like I'm haunted, and I know that puts me. But I'm listening to you, and you know what? We shop at Trader Joe's. It's mostly me who goes there, and Barbara's going to laugh at this, but there are no self checkouts.
Yeah.
Right? You have to, and God help, there's such great people. But I swear to God, I know the background of almost every checker. I know I can go on and on. It's almost like they're my best friends, and I never thought about, oh my God, they're not pushing any product and stuff, just being humanized. They do check my eggs to make sure they haven't cracked. And I'm just really, and I'm not going to promote that company because I'm so far to the left. I don't trust any company, but it's just interesting where we can see little pockets of things like that that keep us a little human.
Mhm.
Anyway, thanks so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Yes. Have we anyone else?
Me, Rosie.
Hey, Rosie.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Scott. I'm dinosaur too. And I make no apologies about it. I really enjoyed your presentation today, Caroline. Thank you. And when I saw Emily's name come up, I thought, yes, she's going to contribute something really good, because I value what she has to share from the standpoint of she's so young and and refreshing and knowledgeable of her surroundings and what's happening. And so I love the way she so eloquently stated what she did. And because all along as I'm listening, I'm just thinking, I am so anti this whole metaverse thing, because even though it's making it sound like everyone will be inclusive, I don't think that the pushers want it to be as such. I think it's elitist in a lot of different ways, and that there's still going to be intentional how do I want to state it, exclusion of peoples. So I just think it's the latest craze for the furtherance of disassociation between human contact and connectivity, and I find it very dangerous. That's my perspective. But thank
Oh,
you.
thanks,
It
Rosie.
was really awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rosie. And we're going to go ahead and move toward communion. Let me say, first of all, that that all of the Caroline and all of you who have contributed in whatever way represent to me probably what's happening with everybody on the call with us right now. And that is, Caroline, you have contributed to the elevation of a vibration among us that has released a capacity to articulate things that are deep inside of us that don't, necessarily always get expressed, even though they're within. But we just need a window. We need a way to get out into that fresh air. And so, may we capitalize on this by embracing this moment. Roy, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'll be quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm struck. I think much of this is inevitable. You know, there's no reason why somebody has to work in an Amazon fulfillment center. There's technology, I think, if not there now, that certainly very soon that can do those jobs. The question though is, what happens to the people who are doing the jobs now?
Right.
And that is a policy decision. That's a societal choice. We can decide to have a basic income for all people. We can decide that you know, we take care of folk and allow them to find themselves and to build a human society, or we can decide that all of the resources go to whoever has the capital and owns the warehouse and the rest of the folk, and it just turns into this dystopian mess. But those are choices. And I think there's a place at which we need to begin to raise those questions and wrestle with them. And how do we take changes that are very real? And every time technology changes, people are displaced. When we first had cars, all of a sudden, all the people who took care of horses didn't have jobs anymore. So there's you know, there's a reality there. I think it's increasing exponentially, and there's an awful lot of us who are going to find ourselves, I think, doing jobs that really aren't needed anymore. So what do we do about that as a society? And that's the place that I think we really need to speak, and we really need to work.
Roy, I'll tell you one funny thing. Like every time I give one of these talks, my very last edit is to pull out 4 lines where I just like blast Jeff Bezos just for even existing. So, and I did that again this morning. I was like, I just can't. It's just too obvious. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you said.
Thanks, Roy. And Lisa wants to add something. Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of go towards what Roy was thinking about those people that get displaced by the newest and latest thing. I've always thought that, or what I'm thinking is that we go back to making what is valuable. Like all those people could help soil restoration. All those people could help take all the trash in the landfills and find a way to utilize it rather than buying new plastic. I mean, we need to just pull ourselves away from the distractions. Oh, this is the new, latest, and most interesting thing. And say, no, the most interesting thing is, how do we support the earth? How do we take all the damage that we're doing and fix it? Not just stop doing it, but find a way to stop doing it and fix the damage. And if we take the things that we've already created, all the destruction that we've already created, and use that to create, then those people would have jobs. They just do different things. Instead of destroying the world, they would be supporting the world. They would be supporting the birds and the animals and the plants, and make that the valuable thing. Make that the thing that people spend money on, not the newest and latest garbage. So it's a change and shift in the people that have power and have money. They need to pour their money into something that creates, not destroys.
There was a provision for a climate core in the infrastructure Inflation Reduction Act, and it got stripped out at the last minute, which was really disappointing. But
Wow.
yeah, I agree with you.
I have to say that y'all have gone so deep, taken me so deep that I feel like I've entered a different dimension let me say, a more real dimension from the, the falseness that keeps trying to pervade our consciousness. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that actually can heal our bodies. I mean, engagements like this can actually bring healing to our physical persons. And so may that happen. And, before I stop, put a plug in for anybody who is geographically close enough that next Sunday, we will be meeting in person, and let's see what happens there. And Doss Williams, again, will be our speaker. And I think that in another way that he will contribute to, our becoming.
Pastor David, may I just add something? Being in the higher ed context, we recently had a discussion among academic advisors about utilizing chatbots. And we took a vote, and I abstained because I had an encounter with an international student from India who shared with me about his frustrations about wanting to get things done, but yet being tossed around and round and round and round. Oh, go to this person. Oh, the thing is, it's written on this web page. Oh, then he goes there. Then he just brought it was just in a circular motion to the point he even asked me, is this the culture of the United States to do things like this? In India or in Asia, we look at this, we look at the situation, we look at the resolution, and we work towards it. But here, I just get tossed to and fro. So I had this, I just let him, and he said, I wish the people who represent the office that I need to go to were there. I want to speak to a person, he said. And that is why I instead of like, oh yeah, I see the value of these things. I see the value on one hand, but on the other hand, because I'm in the program that trains mental health professionals, I'm wondering, and Caroline, I know you touched on this about, okay, yes, the meta universe, okay, these things are inevitable. However, and you brought in Grace Osborne's contribution, and I remember what she shared, and then for us to really occupy the space that we're given, and then Petey, you said right here, we're engaging in these meaningful conversation. I'm wondering how much of this, as technologies advance, and Lisa, you talked about people who have the money. I think that's the issue right there. People who have the money don't want to circulate money. They want to, profit themselves. And who cares about people who get displaced? That's the inequity that we're dealing with, right? And so, but also, I'm wondering how much of this is going to yet contribute to people's mental health, and the fact that less and less, human connections are going to happen, more and more isolation. And this is my space. There's no need for me to go out of my space, because I have potentially everything that can serve me and my needs by, automated means, if you will. And then, lose the desire and the need to touch people. And so all this is circulating in my head, and yeah. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing in the perspective from the world of academia. Well, let's have communion. Let me just add that our life, Diane and me, our life this week was what you talked about. So many elements of it. Just back in early 2020, we had tickets to go to New Orleans, and I had told Diane years before, because she had never been there, that I I'd been there for work a couple of times, but she had never been there. And I said, I just want to take you there someday to experience the cuisine. And so we bought tickets in early 2020, and then COVID happened. So we had vouchers that were going to expire next week. So we went there in the middle of this week. And I thought about that when, I thought, we could have, with AI, we could have had that whole experience and saved the environment. I don't know how authentic it would have been. I don't know how you replace the warmth of the people, of the woman who checked us into the hotel, the amazing, New Orleans kind of people that are unlike any people we've met in the world. They're just their own thing, the musicians and all of that. Maybe that's where we're headed, but wow. It's
going to be complicated unraveling all this and figuring it all out, I think.
Yes. Well, everybody, I hope you have your elements. And again, thank you, Caroline, for, I feel like this moment, just came to give release to us, particularly, obviously not everybody's in the same space, but particularly in a moment of great distress, as Kenichi identified earlier, the mass shootings in California, 3 police killings in Los Angeles in the first 3 weeks of the year. And then, of course, I have not watched the video of Tyrese Nichols being destroyed. But this is all part of the world and culture, not to mention changes internationally, what's ahead for the Ukraine Russian conflict with the involvement of Western powers. And this is where we need to be renewed in our connection to what is real, what is changeless, and that's what we call the mystery that we call God. And so we come into an awareness of God's presence, as testified to in that song, "Look What You've Already Done," that we heard earlier. Look what you've already done. It's January still, but look what you've already done. You've given everything for us, and we witness to it through the taking of the body and the blood of our Redeemer. Would you eat and drink at this time? Let me say that I really appreciate you being here today, for us to be witnesses together, to have this experience as witnesses together of the beauty and the sorrow and loss in our world and in our lives. Thank you, God, for being present for us and with us. And yes, we will look at what you've already done. Amen. Have a wonderful